Hi, and welcome to this video on spectrophotometers. So I've been using spectrophotometers for a very long time. This is the first one I got from X-Rite, which was in probably early 2000s. I used spectrophotometers like this before that in 1990 something. And then I started switching to what was then Great Macbeth i1Pro. Later on, I switched to the i1Pro 2, and now I have the i1Pro 3, and we have also here the i1Pro 3 Plus. Now, should you upgrade if you have a very old device? If you have one of these or this one, then definitely yes, because the software won't work anymore with these devices. So you have to use something more recent. The i1Pro 2, 3, and 3 Plus are fairly comparable devices, but they do have their differences. And I'd like to go over what those differences are and what the advantages are of each of the specific devices and what the um, consequences are of choosing a certain device. So let's start with the i1Pro 2. And that is now fairly old. If you have one, it will probably still work because they work for a very long time. But the problem that you could have is that your software is now updated to um, a software version that requires one of these. So you have to upgrade. There's an upside because this device is old, and unless you have it recalibrated by X-Rite, it probably won't be accurate anymore. So there's a good reason to upgrade to an i1Pro 3 or an i1Pro 3 Plus. But then, which one should you get? Because the Plus is definitely a bit more on the expensive side, but it can also do some things that this one cannot. So let's talk about which one you should get for which application. One of the biggest differences between these two devices is the aperture. So if you look at the opening through which it measures light and color, that is only like, what is it, 6 millimeters on this device, on the i1Pro 3 without the Plus. On the Plus version, you can see that this is a much larger opening. So it is almost twice as big as the i1Pro 2, which means that you can do some things with this device that you cannot do with this one. One of the biggest advantages of using the Plus is when you measure a surface that is completely rugged, like for instance, if you print on carpets, that would be the most dramatic one. But also if you print on fabrics, then your media is not going to be flat, it's going to be bumpy. And depending on how the light hits the color that you're measuring, you might get all kinds of reflections that will mess up with the actual color. So that means you will get a less accurate profile when you try to do a profile on canvas or a fabric using this one because of its small aperture. It only measures a tiny area of the surface of the media that you're measuring. Even if you do a scan measure, you do measure more, but the width is still pretty small. So for that purpose, the i1Pro 3 Plus is definitely better. So is it always better to use an i1 Pro Plus? Not always, no. If your printer is fairly small, and if you never print on fabrics, but only print on photo paper, then the advantages of the i1Pro 3 Plus are limited. One of the biggest disadvantages of the i1Pro 3 Plus when you print on smaller printers is that the patch size that you have to use to measure profiles with the i1Pro 3 Plus are pretty big. So how big? I can show you the difference. This is a target page of the i1Pro 3 Plus. And the colors look funky because I'm using a green screen, so some colors are becoming transparent. You see half through, but that's not how it normally looks. Look at this area where it's normal, and you can see that those squares are quite big. They're 16 by, in this case, 20 millimeters, which you need for the most advanced measurement mode. We'll get back to that in a second. The smallest one you can use on the i1Pro 2 is 16 by 16. Now compare that to this target. Your patches can be a quarter of that, so 8 by 8 millimeters. That means that you will need on a small printer 4 times the number of pages to create exactly the same profile in terms of number of patches. And if you're doing 2033 patches, which is the default, then it's a lot of pages. And as you can see with this one, it's just one page if your printer is big enough to print this page. So that's a definite disadvantage of the i1Pro 3 Plus. But it does have its strengths when you do some specific things like printing on fabrics or printing backlit displays. I've made a video on backlit or transmissive profiling recently, so you can see that on my channel. And I won't go into the details of how to do that, but this is the only device, the Plus is the only device that can do transmissive profiles. This one cannot. If you never make a backlit display, then that's not much of an advantage. But if you do print fabrics, then it might be an advantage for you. And fabrics could also include canvas. It's less popular now than it was like 10 years ago, printing canvas, but there is still a market for it. And of course, there are other applications where you print on fabric. And the i1Pro 3 Plus just excels at that compared to the i1Pro 3 without the Plus. So to show you what that looks like, I can switch to my Mac. And I've opened up here ColorThink, which is my default tool to look at profiles because they offer a bit more functionality than others in viewing and comparing profiles. So what I did here is I created a profile for this particular fabric, which is a cotton. And this was a small target, so I just used 5 pages of A4 size. And first I measured it in the M2 mode that is compatible with the i1Pro 3. That gave me the profile that you see here. And then I switched to the i1Pro 3 Plus and used the polarizer filter on it, which avoids the specular effects that you get as interruptions of your proper measurements when you're measuring on a non-flat surface like a fabric. And if you use that one, and I measured exactly the same target, so there's no cheating, I got this profile. So you can see it. I made it slightly transparent so you can see both, but you can see that the black point got way down and the color gamut got way bigger. Now, does it translate into a dramatic difference that you see in the profile? No, because basically if you're sending 255 red to your printer, then you won't get more red if you profiled using the i1 Plus or the non-plus. I mean, the reddest red it can make will still be the reddest red. The profile cannot add colors. It can only reduce your colors and make them linear and make them accurate. So what you will get is slightly better colors. And to prove that, I've done this little print, which is like color patches. And I can measure these, of course. And when I measure these, when I make them on the M3 instead of the M0 mode, which I did with the i1Pro 3, then I can see that I get slightly more saturated colors when I measure one of these saturated colors at the bottom. And I can see that the blackest black that I get has a lower L value. So the L value on this one is 27, and on the other one it's 29. So it's not a huge difference, Um, you might be able to see it. Some people won't, but it's definitely measurable. So it will give you better quality. But don't think that it will give you like 20% better quality, because it's only a fraction better. So basically, if you have a very large printer and you print on fabrics a lot, or you print backlit displays, go for the i1Pro 3 Plus. If you have a tiny printer and you don't like to spend a lot of money profiling and printing target pages, then the i1Pro 3 without the Plus is the more logical option. One thing that did stand out to me is that the repeatability, so that means if you measure the same color 10 times without moving the device, the actual i1Pro 3 results were slightly more consistent than the i1Pro 3 Plus. That surprised me a little bit, because the larger aperture would suggest that in darker colors you'd get less variation. But for some reason I got slightly better results with this one. You wouldn't be able to see the difference, but I could tell from the numbers that I got that they were slightly different. So that's it. So in conclusion, if you want to have one of these, get a new one. If you have the i1Pro 2, it's definitely worth upgrading to i1Pro 3 or Plus if you have the specific application of fabrics or backlit display. And I'm not sponsored by X-Rite, so this doesn't make me any money or anything, but I just wanted to give you an overview, because I basically got this one to see what the difference was and if it would be have an advantage for my applications. And I didn't know, and I couldn't really tell from the specifications if it would. But this is probably an easy overview. And if you have any questions about this, then feel free to contact me. And if you have any questions on profiling or using the X-Rite devices, then let me know. Thank you for watching, and bye-bye.